This is a very important pasuk. It's about time we talked about it.
Yeah, indeed.
So this week, Parshat ואתחנן. Before we start, we'll just mention that last year we discussed the whole idea behind davening because a lot of halachas of davening are learned from Moshe Rabbeinu from this Parsha. And even though it seems that Moshe Rabbeinu's actual davening was not accepted in Shemayim, we still learn a lot of the halachot from davening from Moshe, which raises a big question. How come? Don't we want our davening to be accepted? So why do we learn from Moshe Davka? We'll link that video at the end of this video. And as always, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like it. Feel free to comment and share with your friends. And if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to our channel. So this week I want to discuss one of the more important psukim in our life that we say on a daily basis, several times a day. We say it in many events and occasions throughout our life and throughout our history. The Pasuk of Shma'a Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. And when reading this week's Parsha and seeing this Pasuk, you really have to notice that it doesn't actually stand out. It's not as dramatic as you would think it would be. And the big question about it is, how come this Pasuk became such an integral part of our life? When reading the Psukim, it's not that dramatic. It just goes with the flow of Psukim. It kind of fits in with all the motive of the Psukim in Sefer Devarim. Even next week, later on in Sefer Devarim, we'll read another pasuk, Shma'a Yisrael ata over yom et. That pasuk didn't get so much attention. It wasn't really engraved in our tradition as much as Shma'a Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem Echad. So really, we have to understand, why is it that this pasuk became such an important pasuk in our life? What is it about this pasuk that makes it so special?
So, there's an interesting phenomenon where there are certain people who can write thousands of words, beautiful words, and they put it together into something called a book. And, people buy it, but they don't make a lot of money over it. And then there are other people who write one line, copywriters. They write this one line and they get paid so much for being able to write that one line, that one sentence. And why? Because what they manage to put into that one sentence is going to make the company using that sentence a lot of money. They were able to put in all those ideas that maybe for others would take an entire book into that one line, that one sentence. And I think in a way, if we analyze this pasuk of Shema Yisrael, it really has within it, every single word, all of the most basic concepts that we believe in, all the most basic concepts of Judaism. And if we start from the beginning, we start with Shema. Shema, first of all, it means listen. And we know from Naaseh v'nishma, listening is also learning, it's internalizing. Judaism isn't only about knowing something, isn't only about understanding an idea. It's about a continuous process of listening and learning and internalizing. The second thing we notice about that word is it's singular. We're talking to Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu in plural, but we're saying Shema. As we know, one of the most basic concepts we believe in is the concept of Achdut Yisrael, is the concept of the Shekhinah resting upon Am Yisrael as one, as a whole, as Klal Yisrael. We're not just individuals that serve God. We are many, but we are actually one. And as one, we stood before Har Sinai, and as one, we say Shema, singular, Shema Yisrael. And then Yisrael, which is of course the name Yaakov received, the name that represents his ability and our ability to deal both with the physical and spiritual worlds. And then we can go on to say Hashem Elokeinu. But notice it's not like we say Hashem Hu Elokim, just stating that Hashem Yud Kei Vav Kei is God. We say Hashem Elokeinu, he's our God. We're accepting godliness upon us. We're not just making some statement, there is a God, God created the world. It's personal, it's ours. We're connected to it on a personal level. The relationship that Judaism is all about, that relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is expressed in Hashem Elokeinu. And of course, the end, Hashem Echad, saying Hashem is one. What does that mean, Hashem is one? It's not just saying that there aren't other Hashem. It's accepting that everything, regardless of what it looks like at first sight, we see a world filled with good and bad, with night and day, with things that seem opposite, which seem distant from each other. We go through events which seem darkness, which seem evil. But one of the most basic concepts in Judaism is that all is one. It's all coming from the same source, whether it seems separate and distant and opposite even. Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And as you know, this statement is said not only in good times, also in bad times, like the story of Rabbi Akiva, and like many times throughout history when people were at the toughest time, they would state Hashem Echad, even though it may seem the opposite, even though it may seem, where is God? No, not only there is God, but he's here. Everything I'm experiencing is all part of one, is all part of this godliness that is maybe expressed in multiple ways. Maybe I meet it in different ways, but it's all coming from that same place. So I think this pasuk really is that $1 million line, and it puts together everything that Moshe Rabbeinu teaches us all through Dvarim and all through the Torah. And it really is something that if you want to really express everything in that one line, that really seems to have it all in it.
Very nice. And really really, there's so much meaning in that one pasuk, in those 6 words. It goes so deep, and we're just here to scratch the surface of it, just to give a little bit of understanding of why and how it became such an integral part. But really, as you were saying, the first thing to notice is really it starts off with the word Shma'a Yisrael, which is again a very interesting word to start a statement with. Listen, but not listen in plural, but listen in the singular, directed towards Israel, to Am Yisrael. And as you were saying, Shema, and as we discussed also in the past, there's something a lot deeper behind the concept of listening, because in Hebrew we call ears, they're called oznaim. And the reason they're called oznaim in Hebrew, because it comes from the root, from the shorish of le'azen, to balance. As we know that in the human body, the place that balances a person, that keeps him stable, that keeps him balanced, is in the ears. And just like that in the physical world, the ear's job, the ozen's job, is to balance the person, to keep him stable. Same thing also in the spiritual world. The idea behind Shema Yisrael is to keep on listening to that statement, to hearing that statement, to keep us balanced. As you were saying, the battle that Yaakov Avinu had between the spiritual and the physical, the battle by Lavan, the battle with the Malach, that his whole life was around that battle. The same thing with us, our whole life is around that battle. It's a daily battle. It's an hourly battle between the spiritual and the physical. And in order to balance yourself through it, you have to keep on listening. You have to keep yourself balanced through that statement of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. And as this pasuk is in this week's Parsha, the Chinuch, for example, mentions it as a mitzvah. In this week's Parsha, the Rambam mentions this as the second mitzvah to say in the Sefer HaMitzvot. And as the Rambam says, that the idea behind this pasuk is that we should believe that everything behind reality is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and everything is from the one, from HaKadosh Baruch Hu, who is one. And everything that is happening in reality is from HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And even though we can't see it, and even though sometimes it's hidden, and even sometimes it's an actual battle, again, throughout your entire life, to see it, we still have to continue listening to that pasuk on a daily basis, several times a day, in order to stabilize ourselves, in order to internalize it and be successful in this battle. And again, it's not only by us, but maybe what really gave this pasuk the push is the midrash that says that Yaakov Avinu on his deathbed, lying down, calling over his sons to make sure that they have no questions in Emunah, that they have no questions at HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and his sons turning to him and replying, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. Just like for you, God is one. Same thing for us. God is one. We have no doubt. And Yaakov Avinu replied with Baruch Shem Kvod Malchuto L'olam V'ed. And the midrash continues and says, and that is why we say it every morning and every evening. The last lesson that Yaakov Avinu makes sure to teach his children, to teach Am Yisrael, everyone around us, is the lesson that held him throughout his entire life, balancing those two worlds, the spiritual and the physical. Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad.
You know, we mentioned the famous story of Rabbi Akiva being taken out to his death and saying Shema Yisrael. And for generations, Jewish people, their last words, whether it was on their deathbed or whether they were being taken out and being killed by enemies for being Jewish, their last words were these Shema Yisrael. And the way we picture Rabbi Akiva is, you know, they're taking to kill him and he screams out Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad. But when we actually read the Gemara there, the Gemara says actually something fascinating. It says that the reason Rabbi Akiva was saying Shema Yisrael was for a very simple reason, because it was time to say Shema Yisrael. Ota et zman kriyat Shmaya. It was time to say Shema Yisrael. So Rabbi Akiva said Shema Yisrael. In other words, what this is saying is much greater than, it's not only Rabbi Akiva in the height of this moment screaming out Shema Yisrael as we picture. It's much greater than that. It's the fact that Rabbi Akiva said Shema Yisrael because every day he said Shema Yisrael. Because the statement of Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, is saying exactly that. That it doesn't matter if this is a regular day or if it happens to be the day where I'm being taken out to be killed. It's still Zman Kriyat Shema. And that statement, Shema Yisrael, Hashem Elokeinu, Hashem Echad, is relevant every day, just like it's relevant at that moment. This is an even greater statement, and it connects to what you were talking about listening, about a daily process, about the fact that Judaism isn't only about some great statements at some great moment. It's about that consistency. It's about taking this in. It's about listening Shema every single day, several times a day, even in those challenging moments. That, I think, is all expressed in this pasuk, and really what makes it so special and so unique and so fundamental in our lives.
Exactly, and that's probably one of the more important lessons to remember, that this is a daily struggle. It's a lifelong struggle all the time, and that's why we say this pasuk so many times, the balancing the worlds between the spiritual and the physical. It's not a degree that you acquire in a young age and have the degree for the rest of your life. It's something that happens all the time, and you have to continue reminding yourself, saying to yourself, and listening in order to balance yourself throughout everything. And again, it goes way deeper than this, but we're out of time. And as I said in the beginning, we'll link last year's video right now. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please consider subscribing. Shkoyach.
Shar Koach and Shabbat Shalom.
Shkoyach to you, good Shabbos, and we'll talk again next week. For more Talking Torah videos on different topics, check out our YouTube channel.